Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is the Juice, Dave Sadler. On this week's live episode of the podcast, a lot of fights to talk about. We're going to recap Invicta 8, Bellator 123, and we are also going to break down UFC Fight Night 50. We're going to preview Bellator 124, and we're going to pick the main card fights for UFC Fight Night 51. And we also have some headlines to go over on this week's show as well. Before we get into a couple headlines here, Dave, we have to mention, for those of you listening to the audio version of the podcast, we will have an interview this week with UFC newcomer Johnny Case up ahead of his UFC debut at UFC Fight Night 52, which will be next weekend over in Japan. So definitely check out that interview. We will also have Nick from ANN Sports. He's the N of ANN Sports, as he will come on to talk about the UFC Topps card set, their brand new set, UFC Champions 2014. It will be dropping this week. He's going to talk to us, and also we will be running a contest with Nick from ANN Sports where one of our lucky listeners will have a chance to join a live case break. That's what they call it, where we have a chance to win some free cards from that brand new set. And you're going to kind of go up against me in the process to see if you can get better cards than me in this case break. So that should be a fun time, and that's what we got going on this week's Beyond the Cage. Oh, failed to mention before we get to Dave, Bellator 124 this weekend. If you missed the audio version last week, or you haven't watched the video already on YouTube, I got to talk with Jason the Finisher Fisher right here on Beyond the Cage, up ahead of his fight at Bellator 124 against MMA veteran Tony Hervey. So he will be fighting on the Spike.com portion of this week's Bellator card. Hopefully it'll get shown on the main card here in Plymouth, Michigan. So if you haven't listened to that, check it out. Great stuff from Jason, one of the training partners of our good friend Darren Cruikshank. So definitely a good interview. But let's get to the Juice, who has, I think he's come down from his high from this past weekend of seeing Garth Brooks in concert. Or has he not yet? I don't know. Juice, tell us about that concert.
Well, I do have some friends in low places, and I'm not shameless to admit that. But we do need to get this show on the road, Jim, because I can hear the thunder rolling outside.
Oh man, that did you rehearse that? Did you rehearse that?
That was on the fly.
Wow, that was awfully impressive. Those were all Garth Brooks songs for those of you people who don't know Garth Brooks. But wow, that was impressive, man. Wow,
Jim,
that'd be the most impressive thing you've ever said on the show.
Thank you. Oh wait, hold on. Oh man, I should have had those things up.
Oh, you didn't have the effects. Oh, here comes the effects.
You said it was the most impressive thing I've ever done?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
No, Jim.
Oh, something ominous is about to happen.
No, let me tell you how awesome this was. Like, I love MMA, and you've seen the videos of me, like, at UFC 167 going crazy and doing all sorts of weird things. I found a ticket stub from when me and my wife went to Garth Brooks, and I actually went back and typed in on Google. It was 5,812 days between Garth Brooks' appearances, and it was the most amazing thing ever. Like, I love some UFC, and I love MMA, but when this guy came out, it was awesome. The day after was rough, but yeah. When he comes to Detroit, I may have to come up and check him out there, too. And if any of our listeners live near a Garth Brooks concert, just give me a call. And, yeah, come by. Spend an evening with the Juice.
All right, well, let's get to a couple headlines here on the show. Let's mention our friends, VigilanteMMA.com. You can follow them on Twitter at VigilanteMMA. And I guess the first headline is Thiago Silva, after holding some people at gunpoint and charging into a gym down there in South Florida and being arrested by the Miami-Dade County Police down there. I guess the gym or the people involved, whoever was involved, I think that's who it was, they decided to not press charges against Thiago. So more or less his case was thrown out. He didn't serve jail time or anything. And upon this news, the UFC, and I guess you could throw in Dana White in there, have kind of gone back on their word. They said that they were not going to bring Thiago Silva back after this incident. But lo and behold, Dave, he has been reinstated by the UFC and may fight here before the end of the year. Now, let's remind people, no one was hurt or shot in this incident, but it did involve a gun, and it could have been a criminal offense had charges actually not been dropped. Let's not forget that. But I think it's not so bad that they're bringing him back. I think that's maybe not the issue. I think it's more going back on their word saying they wouldn't bring him back, I think is maybe more of the issue here, Dave, to me.
Well, we can talk about this, Jim, and we can kind of parlay it into the whole Ray Rice situation, how the NFL was in a situation where they should have gotten out of the Ray Rice business as soon as they saw the very first video that came out of him punching his fiance. The one thing I think that people don't give the UFC credit for is, let's remember, Thiago Silva is not an employee of the UFC. He is basically a contractor with the UFC. You know, the way that they're employed or how they're employed is a little bit tricky. But when something comes out with Thiago Silva, where I guess we got to say allegedly, because you know they went back on their words, somebody was lying, whatever. But the first thing they did was say, we can't have a felon, we can't have somebody in jail on our roster. We are out of the Thiago Silva market right now. And they distanced themselves from it because, it's one of those things where it's going to be on the news. UFC fighter Thiago Silva. It's not going to be some random guy with terrible tattoos named Thiago Silva. It's always going to be UFC fighter. But they can say, no. We released him. He's no longer a part of our organization, so on and so forth. I have no problem with them going back, because if we ran a business, we can't have felons working for us. We can't have felons fighting people in a cage. You know what I'm saying? And this is one instance where I think the UFC is right. They're 100% right.
Well, obviously the guy's entertaining, and that's one of the reasons why he's going to come back. I guess I would have liked some type of suspension period. It's right after this news comes out that the charges have been dropped. He's back in the UFC. You know what I mean? It's just so quick. It's like, oh, well, now he's not accused. I guess it's okay to bring him in. He still did the act. There was still news about it. Someone dropping charges doesn't make what he did go away. It just doesn't mean he's not going to serve jail time or a fine from it.
But it does make it go away.
But just like in Ray Rice's, you brought up Ray Rice. Ray Rice did the crime, but he's not going to serve jail time. That doesn't mean it goes away.
But there's also not video proof of Thiago Silva doing anything. I'm not in the business of defending Thiago Silva at all.
I mean, we're comparing a little different situations. Obviously, there's a video of Ray Rice doing what he did. There's not. But the fact is, the news crews were down there. The police lesson on the scene. He did something. You know what I mean? Something happened there. He just didn't get arrested willy-nilly. So what he did happened, and the charges were dropped. So I don't know. I would have liked some type of suspension period or something before this. Maybe that's all. I'm not trying to be too harsh on it. I'm just saying this is maybe another sign the UFC jumping to conclusion saying, oh, we're not going to bring somebody back, and then they do. And this is, again, a learning experience, so maybe not be so harsh the first time. You know what I mean? That's all. And we've seen that several times, Dave.
Let me ask you this question. Can the UFC, when Thiago Silva is arrested, can the UFC go out and stand behind him?
Could they? They could. I don't know if did they?
They did not.
I know. I realize they didn't, but I thought you said could they? I said they could.
I guess my thing is, think about it from the UFC's point of view. Let's just say round numbers. they have 500 people on their roster, right? Let's just say they get a phone call that Anthony Pettis was driving intoxicated or was at a club and there was a shooting or something, right?
Okay.
They don't have eyes on all 500 people. They kind of have to make snap judgments. The UFC doesn't really have the time to figure out, like they don't have time to figure out every little detail. And the good thing is that the UFC, and Dana said it before, maybe even to a fault, they kind of run the UFC by the seat of their pants at some points. And I think that's, in these instances, it's a good thing. Remember when Miguel Torres got cut for making a terrible joke on Twitter? Well, then I was going through YouTube and I saw an interview with Dana where he said, Miguel Torres, without any prodding, he donated a bunch of money to like rape victim counseling places. He went and took rape sensitivity classes, all this kind of stuff, and changed himself. And then the UFC said, well, if he's done all that on his own without us telling him he needs to do that, then I think he served his punishment. And I think the same thing can be said with Thiago Silva. I don't remember how long ago it happened, maybe a year ago. That man's gone 1 year without making any money to provide for himself.
Well, and the thing is, when you stand by someone, it doesn't have to mean they condone what he did. They can say, our comment is that, we're not terminating his contract until all the facts are out or till he has been charged and sentenced. There's nothing wrong in saying that, is there? And saying, hey, as of right now, he's not serving jail time. So until he does, we won't cut him, but we're not going to give him any fights. It doesn't have to be a big spectacle about the thing. But
right.
the best basically that's what they did, is that they cut him, but they thought, well, if the facts come out and he's okay, we'll re-sign him, so to speak. But if they could have all along said, hey, we're just not going to schedule him fights until this ordeal is fixed, and then it has fixed, he's still technically employed by the organization. I think that would have been a better way of handling it than saying, we're not going to deal with this guy anymore, and now here we are later, he's not going to jail, and they bring him back.
Hey, not to go off and steal.
Maybe we're nitpicking. Maybe I'm nitpicking here, but
well, not to go off. But isn't it funny that Thiago Silva was, arrested, gone through all that, and the UFC still brings him back. And let me click on something real quick here. Live show again. Thiago Silva. No, not the soccer player.
You got to search Thiago Silva, UFC fighter.
Yeah. All right, Thiago Silva, fighter. Found him. I bet it's not even the UFC one. Okay, so in Thiago Silva's last 5 fights, going back to January of 2011, he is 2-1-2. Commits a crime, pays the price, arrested, the whole 9 yards, and yet Ben Askren can't get a contract in the UFC.
There you go. There's some reasoning right there.
Speaking of Ben Askren, did you see the video?
Yeah, he did an interview with Ariel Helwani. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago?
No. You didn't see the one on Inside MMA?
I didn't see the Inside MMA interview. I read the transcripts of his interview with Ariel. That's the interview I saw, but he said similar things in both those, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and Kenny Rice cut him off. He cut him off and was like, "You're done. We got to go to commercial," or like he was basically like, stop talking. Listen, real quick on Ben Askren. I think he gets wrecked by most of the guys in the top of the UFC. He said in all these interviews that he can make a living in ONE FC, and that most of the people who are in the UFC would rather go to places like ONE FC, and that's ridiculous. That's an absolute lie. Jim, if we have the best podcast in Kankakee, Illinois, which is where I'm at, this isn't enough for me. I want to be on Ariel Hawani's level. You know what I mean? Like, I want people to pay us to do a podcast. So me staying in this little bubble isn't going to work. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have goals that I want it to be that good. You know, I want Beyond the Cage to be that way. Same thing like I want Fight Chick to be the next Tap Out. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're Ben Askren, you won the ONE FC belt, you won the Bellator belt, and if you walk down the street, 70% of MMA fans don't know who you are. Nobody cares until you're a UFC fighter. I'm looking out here. I see Brian Ebersol's banner. He told me that the 3 letters UFC are life-changing. That now when he goes to a school in Idaho and does a seminar, it's UFC fighter Brian Ebersol, not MMA journeyman Brian Ebersol. UFC. Look at your poster behind you, Jim. Those 3 letters that just stick out. UFC. It's a brand. Nobody knows what a ONE FC is.
Yeah, and if his goal in life is to make a living at something he loves and as his profession, great. More power to Ben Askren. Fight wherever you want. Fight in Asia. Fight in Bellator. And then come World Series of Fighting. Fight any other organization you could think of that's not the UFC. If that's his goal, great. More power to him. But if he wants to fight the best, he's going to have to come to the UFC. And it's a two-way street. It seems now that Ben Askren almost doesn't want to come to the UFC, and now the UFC is kind of like, oh, now that he doesn't want to come here, we kind of want him more. It's kind of like that, with the whole, oh, if I ignore this girl, she'll want me more. It's kind of like they're playing head games with each other. And whether that will get him signed or not, I don't know, because right now he's facing nobodies. And, yeah, he's finishing nobodies, but you should finish nobodies. So, at least with Bellator, he was fighting people that, one, we could actually watch the events. 2, we can watch him at a reasonable hour, if you do want to watch him. And 3, we know the guys he was fighting, or had seen the guys he was fighting before. Right. And none of these Japanese guys or Chinese guys or whoever he's fighting, no one's ever heard of before outside of those countries. So right. It doesn't do anything if he goes in there and submits a guy in the first round this past weekend or 2, whenever he fought relatively recently. So, yeah. If he wants to fight the best, he'll have to come to the UFC. If he just wants to make money, more power to him. Continue to fight ONE FC.
Yeah. One last point on that interview. If you get a chance to watch it, the actual CEO of Access TV apologized to Ben Askren for the way Kenny Rice acted and cut him off and all that kind of stuff. And it's a big ordeal if you watch it. The one point that I will make is Kenny Rice got a lot of respect from me because all these people are asking, they're like tiptoeing around the stuff, and Kenny Rice goes at Ben Askren and is like, look, you say you're the best. Like, just like we said, you say you're the best. Why don't you come to the UFC? And, it was kind of like he deflects it and says, life's not all the UFC. If you're an MMA fighter, yeah, it is. But like I said, I like what Kenny Rice did. He went right after Ben Askren, and I wish some more of the media members would ask questions. Ask tough questions. You're a journalist. That's what you're supposed to do. And yeah, you should watch the video. We can talk about it next week.
All right. Ultimate Fighter Season 20 starts this Wednesday with a 2-hour premiere episode on Fox Sports 1, 10 Eastern, 9 in the Central, and I guess that's what, 7 in the Pacific?
I think that's 4 in Hawaii.
Yeah, something like that. All right. Well, anyways, the much-anticipated season is finally arriving, Dave. They've had a lot of huge media tour with all the members of the team, including the coaches, Gilbert Melendez, Anthony Pettis, Felice Herrig, Carlos Esparza, a lot of other cast members here. And I guess this is, again, maybe a little nitpicking thing. since they're not fighting their way onto this cast, and it's simply 16 members, I was a little surprised the premiere episode was 2 hours. I'm kind of like, what are they going to show in this 2 hours? Are they going to actually show 2 fights, or, because normally the premiere episode is only an hour unless it's, they're fighting their way onto the cast. So that was interesting to see.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. I was looking. So it starts tomorrow. So 1, 2. Oh, great. My calendar on my computer is a piece of junk. I was just wondering how many weeks it is right now. No, that's weird. That's really weird. I was at the Fan Expo right after the girls went into the house, and they were at the Fan Expo. They were doing interviews in the whole 9 yards. I wonder if they'll show some of that. Since people knew they were coming on the show. Maybe we'll get a little background. Maybe there were crews with Felice when she was flying from Chicago to Vegas, or any of these girls. I have a feeling it's going to be more of that, more of a, hey, this is Heather Jo Clark, hey, this is Jessica Penne, because people need to know who these girls are, and I think that's probably what the 2 hours is going to be.
Well, if you start with this Wednesday today and you go all the way till December 12th, that's 10 consecutive weeks. So I don't know if they're going to have a 10-episode season or they're going to try to make it 12. And I guess you could say it's 11 if you count this as 2 episodes into one as a 2-hour premiere, because they could have like a 2-hour finale even and make that technically 12 episodes disguised as 10, because they normally have, 1 fight a week, during the preliminary rounds. So you got your 8 fights, and then afterwards, you got the 4 quarterfinal fights, and you can split those up into 2 each week if you want. I don't know how they want to do it. So it'll be interesting, because usually they haven't announced obviously when the finale is going to be yet. They kind of keep.
December 12th.
So the 12th is going to be the finale.
Yep.
So that's like I said, that's 10 weeks starting from Wednesday. So that means there's technically only going to be 9 episodes leading up to that point, with the final fight coming on the 12th.
Well, I went back and looked, and the Tate Rousey season was 13, and the Penn Edgar was 12 episodes.
Yeah, it's usually 11, 12, or 13, depending on how they want to kind of work things out, because the 13th episode has typically been the fight in the house. And if they don't have that, then you typically see 11 or 12. So this looks like to be a 9-fight show, and that usually they end up taking that Wednesday off before Thanksgiving as well. So it could end up only being an 8-episode season, or an 8-week,
Right.
So I don't know. I guess we're nitpicking, but that's just the interesting kind of breakdown. So hopefully, if they do end up only showing 8, though, those should be some jam-packed episodes. Those should be more than 1 fight a week then.
Yeah, and being that the season's already taped, we don't know. These first 2 fights could be quick. These 2 could be, they both went 3 rounds, barn burner, Bonner, Griffin type stuff. But hey, to nitpick just a little bit further, what are your thoughts on the season? It's called The Ultimate Fighter: A Champion Will Be Crowned, not Ultimate Fighter Team Melendez and Team Pettis. Because I think people know Pettis, but Melendez is a little kind of under the radar. And, I know they're going to come out and it's going to say Team Melendez and Team Pettis, but usually it kind of says that in the title. It's kind of weird they don't do that.
It is, and if the focus is being taken away from the coaches, it begs the question, why did they bring in such high-profile coaches to begin with, or high-profile fighters where a title fight will culminate at the end between the 2 coaches, if they're not going to be put in the headline? Because usually that was one of the original selling points of the original Ultimate Fighter, was to sell Randy Couture against Chuck Liddell. Obviously build young stars, but its main factor was trying to get more, build up a fight over a couple weeks, and that's. It continued on since the Ultimate Fighter has switched from Spike to Fox Sports. And taking the coaches out is fine, that's no problem. You're taking less emphasis off the coaches, which in this case, if you're going to take emphasis off the coaches, it should be for a winner will not just get a contract but become a UFC champion. But it almost makes you wonder, maybe they should have picked somebody, less important or guest coach, some rotating type of thing, kind of like they did with the comeback season where there weren't specific coaches. For the season there was a couple, it kind of begs the question, maybe they didn't really need to pick Anthony Pettis and Gilbert Melendez to do this.
Yeah, I think I made an excellent point, Jim, to be quite honest with you.
Yes, you did. But, I mean, we'll see as the season goes along. At least as of right now, they're tagging. Who knows? Maybe by season 2, it's already, they changed that, and now it says Melendez Pettis.
Do you have a sleeper and a favorite in this one?
Favorite's Carlos Barza. I think that's probably going to be a lot of people's favorite. And man, it's tough. I'm torn between Tecia Torres and Joanne Calderwood.
Well, I'll say this much. I think
Torres. I would say either one of those have an excellent chance of winning. Those would be like my two dark horses. Would be those two ladies.
I'm gonna use Tecia Torres as my favorite. I was pretty impressed with her last fight in Invicta, and as my underdog, I'm gonna go with Rose Namajunas. I've got a feeling, Jim. I don't think it's gas. I think it's an actual feeling.
All right. Well, let's take a look here and recap two of the three that happened this weekend. Invicta 8, and we also had Bellator 123. I guess we'll start with Bellator 123. It happened first. That's the kickoff card for this season number 11 for Bellator on Spike TV. Also, not the first, but to me, really the first big launching of Bellator under Scott Coker's regime, as opposed to Bjorn Rebney's regime. We saw kind of a fresher look. The canvas wasn't kind of a darker, dingier gray. It was not quite white, but not quite gray. It seemed, to be honest, that may sound weird, Dave, to talk about the canvas, but it seemed to pop more on the HD. Did you notice that with the white canvas?
Yeah,
it
looked a lot like my banner, don't you think? Like this.
Yeah, it's not quite white, but not gray.
Yeah, it was kind of just like it coming through the computer probably doesn't work, but I thought the exact same thing. And the one thing was when you tuned in, it was kind of like, that's different, and it was, but you were like, what's different? You know what I mean? It wasn't like, Scott Coker presents Bellator, like this is my show now, like it was just a subtle thing that was there, and yeah, it was nice because, like I said, it's different, and there's certain things when you watch the UFC, you know what the octagon's going to look like. When you go to the UFC fights, you know what the octagon's going to look like. You know what I mean? Like, their kind of stuff doesn't change. But it kind of signifies, to me, like a cleaning of their hands of Bjorn Rebney. And, like, here's a fresh start, fresh mat, fresh octagon, all that.
Speaking of the shape, it was still the same Bellator, circle cage. But do you think there's any chance they switch to the hexagon, which they used in Strikeforce? Maybe not this year, but next year? Or do you think they stick with that?
They may stick. The only reason why I would say that they may stick with the circular cage is because you've been to Bellator, I've been to Bellator. I don't know how much more real estate it takes up to set the hexagon up, especially at these casinos where they're trying to jam a bunch of people into it. And they've already got, they've got their rigging above the cage, the cameras that they've got going around, all that stuff's already set up. So, I wonder if it's more of a logistical thing. Clearly, Viacom's got enough money. They could buy an 11-sided cage.
And I think for this season, a lot of stuff was already in place. They weren't going to change so much stuff, with this with all these fights coming up. But I think, again, 2015, we could see. The only reason I say it is because, when you create angles that can create problems, people can kind of chase down, back them into corners. But if your cage is completely circular, you can just circle around the cage. You can't. It's harder to cut angles if there are no angles in the cage.
Absolutely.
So I just think from a standpoint of helping their fighters out, I think it works better. So, anyways, all right. Let's run through the first three fights of the night real quickly. Here we had Bobby Lashley fight. We had Cheick Kongo against LeVar Johnson. We also had King Mo fight. All those guys were expected to win. They all did, and they all got finish victories. Now, was that exciting to see them get finishes? Yeah, but at the same time, they're not fighting anybody good, and I guess the one that maybe irks me the most is the King Mo one, because King Mo was supposed to be really big for Bellator, and here he is, taking on this nobody. Yeah, he gets the win, but he's so far been a bust. At least Lashley's a guy trying to make a comeback. You're giving somebody to kind of build him up, and Kongo's again. LeVar Johnson did fight in the UFC. So, that's somewhat of a kind of legit opponent, but a guy, again, Kongo should beat. So, this was Bellator trying to take some of their higher price guys and trying to tell them, hey, these are some of our big stars, and trying to showcase them off against weaker talent.
Yeah. My favorite part of those first three fights was, hey, did you see the tandem McCrory-Brennan Ward fight?
I forgot they threw that one in there, too. I didn't know if that was going to make the main card, but, when it only lasts 30 seconds, that can easily make it. And I didn't even realize the Barn Cat, first of all, was still around. Second of all, fighting at 185. And where did he get that knockout power? Where did that come from? I don't remember that when he was in the UFC. I remember, Dave, I saw Tandem McCrory fight live. I think it was at UFC 87. That's how long ago Tandem McCrory has fought in the UFC. Like that was in like 2008.
He beat Luke Como at UFC 87 in August 2008.
Yeah, I was there. That's when I remember Tandem McCrory. Like I don't remember anything about him after that. That's a long time. That's like 6 years ago.
Yeah, he was the main event of the prelim card, which probably aired on a blog.
Yeah, I don't think they had that thing with Spike TV yet. So, anyways, yeah. So that was a quick fight too, but yeah. Well, yeah. And continue on with your thoughts on the fights though, real quick.
I just heard something drop upstairs. I don't know what it was.
Uh-oh.
It was my wife. She just yelled down, "It was me, honey."
Live show, everybody.
Live show alert. Live show. No. To be completely honest, Jim, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I really don't have anything to say about those three fights. Like, they put big names on there, and they did what they were supposed to do. Bobby Lashley ever going to win a belt? No. If anybody has an ounce of endurance and any kind of skills on the ground, I think Bobby Lashley could get beat being on top of somebody. I think somebody could beat him from the ground via strikes or submission. Cheick Kongo, it's a name, King Mo, I couldn't agree with you anymore. He was supposed to be a huge deal. The next big thing, the guy they could push the brand behind, and that fizzled out. Tandem McCrory, that was impressive. I told you I wanted to watch the Brennan Ward fight, and I wanted to watch it for not what happened. I liked Brennan Ward, but yeah, that was a pretty impressive knockout. Before we get to the main event, you want to talk about that ridiculous stunt in the middle of the the Bellator Steel?
Yeah, it's weird because you think that this would have been something done under Bjorn Rebney, and it wasn't. It was done under Scott Coker, who, as far as I could tell, Dave, he's a pretty laid-back guy. I wouldn't call him a no-nonsense guy, but I think he's not in there trying to get cheap thrills. And this seemed like something that Bjorn tried to do a couple of times, and it's weird that it happened under Scott Coker's watch. And you can see Scott Coker in the background as this is happening, kind of shaking his head, being like, "Oh yeah." And I was kind of surprised he was doing that. Like, he was all into it. So it was clearly his idea, or he backed it. Whoever's idea this was,
He said on Tuesday. See how I did that, Jim? Because some people are going to watch this on Wednesday. So I want to make sure that they think that it's Tuesday. See that? Anyway, on Tuesday, he said that he swears on his father's grave that he had no idea that was going to happen.
Well, he was loving Well, regardless of whether he knew or didn't know it was going to happen, he was loving it was happening.
Right.
We can agree on that.
Right.
And he can't dispute it. Go back and watch the tape. He's grinning ear to ear. But what we're talking about, I guess, with Cloak and Dagger, we're talking about Stephan Bonnar, Tito Ortiz meeting inside the Octagon, announcing that they're going to fight at the Bellator card on November 15th. And a lot of trash talk. Honestly, I thought that comment about Jenna Jameson and his family was kind of a low blow by Stephan Bonnar. That was the only comment I kind of had any problems with. And then some guy in like a mask, towel comes out, and I think that was Justin McCauley, who used to fight in the UFC like back in the day. But to me, if you're going to do a reveal like that, it has to be something people know. I bet there are a lot of people, even hardcore MMA fans, that probably didn't even recognize that as Justin McCauley. It even took me a second to be like, just like it was not of a thing that wasn't needed. First of all, that was definitely not needed. That was rather bizarre because he didn't even talk and he didn't even mention who it was. He's just like, here's a guy that you threw under the bus or whatever. No mention of who it is, whatever. After this big reveal, and then there's some pushing and shoving, which you kind of saw coming after some of the words. I can understand them announcing the fight, maybe having him square off, but I don't know. I don't think it was needed, Dave.
It got you to talk about it, at least. I mean,
yeah, it did. Maybe of how bizarre it was.
Right.
That was a bizarre thing.
It's just, you know what? If this was a card that was just loaded with good fights, slick finishes, young guys winning tournaments and stuff like that, completely different. But you got a bunch of guys who were in the UFC trying to get back to the UFC or trying to be relevant, King Mo, and then you bring in two guys who really couldn't be less relevant in Tito and Stephan Bonnar, and then they push each other. You guys are professional fighters. If you hated him that much, sock him in the face, Like, it's just... What... Serious question. What good comes of putting two professional mixed martial artists in the cage months before a fight? Does the UFC do that?
No. I mean, the only time they've done, every once in a while, they'll bring in like the next challenger to the title into the cage after a fight. They've done that a few times. I remember after Rampage beat Jardine, Rashad Evans came into the cage. You know what I mean? They've done that a couple of times, but it's never like they stop a broadcast, whether it's pay-per-view or otherwise, to like have two guys and announce in front of the crowd and for the audience. What they do more times than not is the fight's already been announced, and in between fights, they have like that teleconference interview with one or both of the fighters. They do that, but they're never in the cage together.
Right. And
so I guess I wouldn't call it groundbreaking. It's different. It does separate them from the UFC, but I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing.
Right. I mean, wasn't Scott Coker in charge of the brawl with the Diaz brothers and Thompson? Was that?
That was when, again, I don't blame him too much because he did let Jason Miller into the cage after Jake Shields had won, but I don't. That one was definitely not staged. That one just went all haywire. But again, it was a situation that didn't need to happen though. Right. Mayhem didn't need to be in the cage.
Hey, you know what's awesome? I have two computers set up right here, Jim, and one of my friends, who's actually friends with Nick from A&N Sports Cards, who we're going to interview tomorrow, he just liked Tamden the Barn Cat McCroy just right now. Huh? How about that? Like he was listening to the show.
That's a great nickname.
I think I'm gonna like him too. Yep, I already did it.
No, but Scott Coker wasn't grinning ear to ear on that Mayhem and the Diaz brother and all that thing. But
like you said, Jim, it doesn't help the product. Them getting in the cage, the only people that care about that are the people who were there. It wasn't like I was like, oh my God, November the 15th they're gonna fight each other. This is great. Like, I was just kind of like, oh.
And didn't we kind of already knew they were gonna fight on the 15th?
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of already, so it wasn't even like a big unveiling that people have never heard of. I think had it been the actual first time, like they kept the news of Stephan Bonnar like under the radar, like we didn't know he signed, they brought him out, and then they were gonna fight. I think we would have been like, wow, that was pretty big. But we already knew Bonnar was signed. We already knew he was calling out Tito Ortiz, and a fight was imminent. You know, it wasn't a whole lot of new information. And I think had it been new information, I can maybe get down with the unveiling. But since it was kind of all known quantities, it didn't seem needed and rather unnecessary. Well, let's get to the main event, Dave, which wasn't unnecessary. In fact, it was fantastic for all 25 minutes as Pat Curran took on Patricio Pitbull for the second time. Very close fight, Dave. I think I would have I think I probably would have scored it 3 rounds to 2 in favor of Pitbull, giving him rounds 1, 3, and 5, and I think Curran 2 and I think that's how I scheduled it. I think that's how I scored it. Heading it 2-2 into that final round, with Pitbull winning the 5th, and the judges scored it 3 rounds to 2 one card and 4 rounds to 1 on the other 2 cards. And I think in this fight, Dave, looking back at the first one, Pitbull was obviously a little more aggressive, definitely landing the more power shots, and I noticed Pat Curran was very flat-footed throughout this fight. It seemed like his footwork wasn't as good, and I don't know if that's because of the kicks as the fight went on, but he wasn't moving around as well and kind of sticking and moving as he did in that first fight. And I think also this time around, Patricio knew that he could go 25 minutes. And I think that was a huge confidence booster to know that, hey, I can go 25 minutes, I can take Pat Curran's best shot, I don't have to worry about getting knocked out. And I think that really made Pitbull more dangerous in this fight. And I think just he was getting off more punches and just was able to be more aggressive this time around, knowing he could go 25 minutes. And he just was a little better than Pat Curran on that night and deserved to win the title.
Yeah. I was following Ray. This was on Friday. I was at work. I was following our buddy Ray Flores on Twitter and on Facebook, and he said that, Pat's got nothing to be ashamed of in that fight, but it looked like his game plan just wasn't the game plan that needed to be implemented against Pitbull. But it's one of those, Jim, where Pat Curran's been in title fights. He was injured. Didn't he have an eye problem or something where he was out for quite a while? Didn't he have that?
I believe he did have an injury, yes.
Yeah, where he was out, then he came back, and I remember leading up, he had a couple of interviews, I think with Ray, maybe Ariel, where he had like depression things and depression issues, and I wonder if after a while all that just builds up, and you just had a terrible night, and a lot of pressure, a lot of people behind you, and maybe this is what Pat Curran needed. Probably not what he wants to hear, but losing the belt can kind of go back to kind of just being Pat Curran, a kick-ass fighter, and good for Pitbull, wins the belt. Ironically, there's no chance for Pat Curran to get a rematch, huh?
Maybe not immediately, but I wouldn't doubt it that we would see a third fight between the two.
Aren't there like 4 people in line for the belt?
Well, the Hasbullaev, I think they're
they released him.
Yeah, so that's one guy they don't have to worry about giving a title shot to. But I think there is. Well, you always got Daniel Straus there in the picture, but I think boy, why is he escaping me? Not Des. The guy who beat Des Green. There was the German guy. Was that Weichel? Daniel Weichel?
Yeah.
Right? Didn't he win last season's featherweight tournament?
Yes, he did.
So he would be technically first, and Strauss and Curran may have to wait here a bit. That's unless Weichel gets hurt. So
all in all, do you think that's a good thing for Bellator that Pitbull wins the belt?
I think so. He's a very exciting fighter. It's still a guy that they can build around, and if Weichel is his first title defense, I mean, you always have a chance, but that's a good fight for Pitbull because it's a fight he should win. He can win in devastating fashion. It really builds, him up even more, if he can defend the title. And then him going against Strauss or Curran, potentially down the line, I think is really good for them. So they got a stacked featherweight division right now, and they got a lot of guys. They can throw a lot of guys that can get in there. And so far, a lot of their most recent title fights in that division have all been excellent. So however route they want to go is good things for that class.
Oh man. Oh yeah. That makes a pretty good 7-day stretch for Team Pitbull, huh? With Betch Correia winning big and then Pitbull winning.
Absolutely, and I believe Patricky Pitbull, the 155 Pitbull brother, I think he has a fight coming up as well. So it could be a very good stretch here for the Team Pitbull down there in Brazil. Let's transition to what ended up being the last fight of this weekend for big MMA action. Invicta 8, as Invicta made their return since last December was their last card. Finally, they came back once again in their home base there in Kansas City, Missouri for Invicta 8 in their first ever event on the UFC streaming service, the Fight Pass. And we had 10 fights shown as part of the total card. I was able to watch the majority of this fight, Dave. We definitely got to give a couple shouts to some of the Fight Chick fighters. Jody Isquibel. We also had Deanna Bennett and Roxanne Modafferi all win repping the Fight Chicks logo there on Saturday night in Kansas City. Looking over some of the fights, Dave, looking at the Bennett fight, I thought that was a very big victory for her, taking out a quality opponent in Michelle, knocking her out in the second round. I thought that was excellent. The Modafferi fight, I tell you what, much improved stand-up since her last fight in the UFC against Raquel Pennington. I thought she looked great. And Tara LaRosa, for a veteran of the sport at one time, one of the top females in the sport, I thought she had a horrible performance. She was smiling a lot, but it's like she was taking that as a sparring match and not an actual match where you're getting paid money. And, I'm not saying Tara LaRosa should retire, but if she's going to fight like that, she don't have that many fights left because people aren't going to want to sign her because she's not exciting. I mean, great win for Roxanne. Tony Evinger had a huge win against Inian Gomes, submission armbar first round. And then how about the comeback Finn and Katja Kankapa coming back on Stephanie Agink in the fifth round, submitting her with a DARS, or what they officially call a kind of anaconda or brow bow choke. That was huge. She was favored, but she was losing that fight. I had her down 3-1 entering that fifth round, and she needed to finish to get the win, and she's able to pull that submission. That was awfully impressive, and I wouldn't be surprised if the next fight is a rematch, because I'd like to see that again. Stephanie Agink, I tell you what, only 4-1 coming into that fight, Dave. She looks like she could be a major player at 115. Not just Invicta, but I'm talking about projecting into the UFC. She's tall, she's lanky, she had a great ground game. She was throwing up the triangles, strong boxing and kickboxing. She kind of reminds me of maybe, the smaller Jessamine Duke. kind of what Jessamyn Duke could be. Now, Jessamyn's run into some, tough times, but once again, she hasn't had a lot of pro fights either. But, it kind of reminds me of Jessamyn Duke a little bit. And, for Kankapa, great comeback for her. And we'll leave the main event in a second, but your thoughts on some of those, the other main card fights here, Dave?
Yeah, everything you said was pretty spot on. Those are most of my points. I'll bring up a couple of nitpicky things that I noticed. I was at the last Invicta. It was at the Ameristar Casino, much smaller venue, similar to what Bellator runs when they're here in Hammond. But this was at like a municipal auditorium, so it was a much bigger venue, and it projected that way on the computer screen. It felt like it felt when you were watching it, it felt bigger than if you go back and watch Invicta FC 7. It just had an appearance that it was a lot more professional. The announce team of Julie Kedzie and the voice Michael Chavello, I very much enjoyed both of those two. I kind of like Julie Kedzie being the matchmaker and the announcer. I thought her insight was great. Not to mention she's also a pretty decent fighter in her time. And I thought all of that made watching it that much more entertaining. And one thing I noticed in the fight, I don't know if you got a chance to sit down and watch the Charmaine Not So Sweet Tweet fight.
Yes, I did. That fight was at 155 pounds.
It was at 155 pounds. But then, did you hear her post-fight interview where she said, "This time, the times of us girls starving ourselves." I'm paraphrasing here, but she said, basically, the girls will never realize how much more powerful they are if they fight at their walk-around weight instead of doing this dehydrating and cutting down and all that, just to be a little bit bigger. Basically, she was saying, if you fight near your walk-around weight, the fights are going to be a lot better because you're going to have more energy, your opponent's going to have more energy, and the fans are going to get what they really want. What do you think about that?
Well, that's kind of it's two sides of the coin there. When you see fighters kind of in between weight classes, I think Diego Sanchez is maybe the most prime example of that. Does he drop down to 155 where he's a bigger guy, a stronger guy, and supposed to have more power, but maybe not as much pace, maybe not as much output? Or does he stay at 170 where he's going to have more energy, more pace, more output, but he could get outmatched physically? It's the old debate. I am under the belief, and again, I'm not a professional fighter, that you should fight at the lowest weight class you can where you can have the best energy. And if the lowest weight class happens to be 5 pounds from what you normally weigh, so be it. For some guys, that's 30 pounds. Every guy or gal is different. And you don't know how you're going to react at a weight class until you actually cut there. So for some people, they can cut weight more than others. Some can't. Some can be more successful. I mean, look at Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar didn't cut that much weight, was able to win a championship only cutting 5 or 10 pounds. Right. Everybody's different. Everybody's skill set's different. The competition they're fighting, may be different, and just how good they are. There's a lot of different factors that play into it. But, if you don't cut that much weight, you're going to have more energy. I think that's a fact. That's a proven fact. And you're probably maybe not be at your maximum, strength level at a weight class, because obviously if you're fighting someone that cuts, but, you're going to have – I guess conditioning-wise, you're going to be in the best condition you can be in because you don't have to worry about some of the health problems. But there's positive, negative, everything. If Charmaine Tweet doesn't want to cut weight to fight at 145, she wants to fight at 155, okay, roundabout way around here. Hey, more power to her. If Invicta can find her opponents, great. That's the thing. If girls want to fight at 155, then Invicta will book fights at 155. I mean, that's how it works, right?
Yeah, I don't mind the 155 because when I was out there, I saw Charmaine, and that's a built woman right there.
Yeah, and it's not like they're fat or anything at 155 pounds by any stretch of the imagination. So if more girls want to fight up at 155, then book the fights. But, you know, if it doesn't seem like there's a lot of interest, regardless of people wanting to cut weight or not cut weight, then don't book the fights. And,
Right.
you know, you know, she's obviously talking more specifically about women's MMA, but I would say most women in the sport, Dave, aren't cutting as much weight on average as guys.
Yeah, I would agree. 100.
So, you know, she could say is starving herself, but like, let's be real here. How much weight? We'll get transition to the main event. How much weight is Michelle Waterson actually cutting to get to 105?
Right.
You know what I mean? Michelle Waterson's not cutting 20 pounds to get to 105.
Agreed. Very much so.
You know, so that's the thing. When there's not a lot of weight there to begin with, your body physically can't cut that much weight, regardless of how you do it. You know, that's also a fact.
Right. No, you're 100% correct, sir.
All right. Well, exciting bunch of fights. You know, really the only I hate to. There really wasn't a boring one, Dave. I mean, I guess the La Rosa Modafferi had a good performance, but because of La Rosa's performance, it kind of, you know, that was the only fight that was kind of like, all the other fights were finishes, they were exciting, and, you know, you had the Concampa, you know, come back, and then we get to the main event, the karate hottie Michelle Waterson putting her title on the line for the first time against newcomer to the States, but longtime veteran in the Japanese women's MMA scene, Yasuko Tamada, actually one of the training partners of Megme Fuji, who was one of the, you know, pound for pound, you know, top female in the world at one time, one of her training partners and friends. You know, I don't know if it was age, technique, skill, or, you know, the jet lag, first time fighting in the United States, coming over from Japan, but Michelle Waterson put on a clinic, and she picked her spots. You know, when she saw a chance to rush in, she would rush in, but she realized Tamada can be dangerous, would back off. Just great footwork, head movement. All her strikes were precise. Her punches and kicks, nasty body shots, nasty knees, which is something new. We haven't really seen Waterson use the knees. And the one that did it for me, even though eventually it ended up being a third-round knockout, when Tamada took that spinning back kick directly to the head, you know, like Uriah Hall style, I was like, man, this is a tough chick. I mean, that was right on the button. It wasn't like, oh, she got it with the foot or anything. No, that was a stone cold, straight up knockout highlight reel kick, and she took that, and I was like, man, that's like throwing everything but the kitchen sink. And you know, eventually she wore her down. Even to have the referee not called it there 2 seconds from the third, I don't think Tamada was going to come out for the fourth round anyway. It started with a big knee that kind of hit where that eye was closing in the bruise, and that kind of started Tamada's downfall. And impressive performance by Michelle Waterson. And like we said, previewing the fight, Dave, I think cements her place as the poster girl for Invicta FC.
Yeah, the problem Michelle Waterson, I think, is going to run into is, like you said, she is the poster woman for Invicta FC. But, you know, they brought Tamada over, who, like you said, is a veteran of the sport. You know, fights primarily overseas. Who else can they bring in to fight this girl? I mean, but just kind of by default, she may have to go up in weight just to find the competition, and, you know, probably end up in the UFC. But I don't know who they could possibly bring in that's gonna come. I don't know who they could bring in that's gonna beat her, or who would want to take that fight.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was there even another atomweight fight on this card? Because at least the fights, I think there was one, maybe.
Yeah, the fight chicks, Jody Esquibel, I believe is how you pronounce it.
And that was the only other one. So, and it's a division that obviously Jessica Penne, I forget how you pronounce it, leaving to go to the UFC and try to make it to 115, I think hurt, because I think that would have been a good rematch for them. So the talent pool maybe there at 105 isn't as deep, and like you said, that kind of hurts Michelle Waterson a little bit. But not having another 105 fight, it really is a question mark as to who is next for her. And maybe, you know, obviously Invicta would like to keep her. They wouldn't want her to go to the UFC, but if that happens, it happens. there could be a case, Dave, where maybe she vacates that title, like you said, and maybe tries a couple fights at 115.
Yeah, or maybe they let her keep it, and I don't think she took too much damage. Maybe at Invicta 9 they let her take a strawweight fight, as long as she can keep active type of thing.
And, maybe some of those remaining strawweights they do have on the roster, I don't know if any of those ladies would consider dropping down to 105. That may be a very real, in terms of a next challenger. You could see that happen. I think that may be what happens next.
Jim, it's been almost 9 months since we saw an Invicta card. In the next 12 months, how many Invicta cards would you like to see in the next 12 months?
So starting from September, we're September 10th today to, I guess, September? Let's run it to the end of 2015, just to make it so that'd be the next, that's 16 months, give or take?
Yes.
I'd like to see 8 Invicta cards in the next 16 months.
Really?
That's an average of one every other month. That's what I would like to see, because we had that huge void there, and I think they have the talent. I think they have the service for it. They got the viewer base built in, and I think it can happen.
Okay.
I don't think 8's an unrealistic number either. I think that's right in the middle. I wouldn't like to see any less than 6, and I wouldn't like to see more than 10. That's why I picked 8, because that's right in the middle. So, all right, let's get to we got UFC recap. Our next recap here, UFC Fight Night 50. Now, if you watched last week's show, or you remember watching last week's show, we actually picked 6 fights. Now, somewhere along the lines, Dave, that got changed from a 6-fight main card to a 4-fight main card. So 2 of the fights we broke down didn't matter on our picks because we only picked main card fights, but they were still great breakdowns nonetheless if you didn't listen to them. So I don't know why that changed, but anyways, so it was 4 fights on the main card. The kickoff fight was in the 155-pound division as Michael Chiesa took on Joe Lauzon. And all I have to say mainly about this fight is it's a shame that it had to get stopped here in the second round due to a doctor stoppage cut. Ends up going as a TKO victory for Joe Lauzon as he keeps up his streak of finished victories here. But this was a great fight. Both guys were going back and forth. Both guys had their moments standing up on the ground in the clinch. It seemed as though Michael Chiesa was starting to get the tide turned back in his favor and got a cut, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was from an elbow coming out of the clinch from Joe Lauzon, a cut right above the eye. Doctors were concerned that the blood was going to drip into Michael Chiesa's eye, impairing his vision. Thus, the fight was stopped. And, I understand, fighter safeties and everything, Dave, but it was just the same because that was such a great fight. I really think it could have went either way, but had to be stopped, and Joe Lauzon gets the victory. But from what we saw, I don't know if it will happen, but that'd be nice if the UFC, once obviously Chiesa's cut heals here, if they could go and book that again, because that was fantastic. And, we got to see 2 guys, to be honest, right around the same level. Even though Lauzon's been around a while, I didn't think that he was that above the head of Chiesa or vice versa there. That was looking to be a really good scrap.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Chiesa. This is a fight that could have really cemented his spot in the division. It had to get stopped. That cut was pretty nasty. I mean, his eyelid or his eyebrow was practically like smacking him in the eye. Doctor stoppages are always tricky. Like Dana said in the scrum, if that fight happens in Nevada, he says no way the doctor stopped that fight. But when you put on shows in random places in Connecticut, stuff like that's going to happen. Good for Joe Lauzon. I didn't know this leading into the fight, but he's had some problems with his newborn child, and he's been in the hospital, and he gets the win bonus. He gets fight of the night. I think it was performance of the night bonus. So good things happening for Joe Lauzon. And I actually read that Lauzon's not a real big fan of rematches. Nothing really for him to gain to fight Chiesa. So it'd be interesting to see if they can talk him into rebooking it. But yeah, that was a good fight, and I think that Dana will take care of Chiesa. That fight was so good and had the makings of continuing to be well. That's not going to go down as a loss in the eyes of the UFC. He's not going to take a step down in competition in this next fight.
And you were in your MMA Signatures hat there, Dave, and I want to bring up that actually AJ, who runs MMA Signatures, along with his family, and I believe Matt Hamill and some other fine folks, they did a charity bowling thing after Joe's fight to, I think it was like, I don't know the total amount, but it was based on like their bowling scores at the end of the night. They were going to donate, I don't know if it was $1 a pin of their total score, something along those lines, to go towards Joe Lazone's son, Joey Lazone, and his health battles, which I believe they said on the broadcast that he's now cancer-free, if I'm not mistaken. So the cancer has been cured, but to help him out. So that's MMA Signatures doing Joe Lazone a solid there. So if you don't follow or like MMA Signatures on Facebook or Twitter, definitely big ups to AJ and his family there for helping, and Matt Hamill for helping out Joe Lazone. I thought that was a pretty classy thing to do.
Yes, sir. Nothing but the best.
All right. Well, the next fight of the evening was in the heavyweight division as Matt Mitrione took on Derek Lewis, and this was just what we thought, Dave. Two big guys swinging at each other, and it was Matt Mitrione that his punch. Well, if you want to call it a punch, it was really them getting in close, and it was kind of like a forearm shove, more or less. It wasn't even really a punch, and that forearm shiver, so to speak, kind of sent Lewis up against the cage. Mitrione followed up with a nice flurry of punches there, and the referee had to come in and stop this one 41 seconds into the first round. And this kind of, do you remember when Sahir Bahaduruza fought, I want to say it was Paulo Thiago, and it wasn't like a punch. Thiago kind of came in, and it was like his forearm hit, Sahir's forearm hit Paulo Thiago. That's kind of what it reminded me of. That's the only fight I could think of where it wasn't really a punch. It was kind of just an in-close kind of forearm shiver there that kind of started the downfall.
Yeah. I still think Derek Lewis has a lot of potential in the heavyweight division. I really do. I thought Mitrione, solid. That's a solid victory. Any win in the heavyweight division is solid. He's still, correct me if I'm wrong, he said he's not one to call anybody out because he's not ranked. I'm just double checking to see if he's ranked.
He shouldn't be ranked by anybody.
No, and maybe I'm in the minority here, but I thought he handled this win with very little class. If you go back and watch Derek Lewis's victory at Tough 19 finale, this one, shirt that I'm wearing, this one.
We got you.
Anyway, if you go back and watch him, he didn't necessarily call out Matt Mitrione. What he said was he heard that Matt Mitrione's fight got scrapped, and since he's, since they're both kind of on the same time frame there, that would be a fight that he would be honored to take. And Matt Mitrione kind of turned that around, like disrespect and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Mitrione rubs me the wrong way. I don't think he's ever going to win the belt. He's kind of a D-bag, and I really don't like the guy. He's been in the UFC for all of his fights, right?
Yeah, all 11 of them.
Okay. So you're going to be disrespected because somebody wants to fight you? I mean, you're the guy in a spot that other people want to be in. I don't think Derek Lewis hates you. He just wants he wants your spot. I don't know. Mitrione just throws me the wrong way.
Yeah, that's what he does. We'll see you guys. I'd like to see Mitrione take on that Anthony Hamilton.
I'd like to see Mitrione get stopped by anybody.
So I think that'd be a good fight. Let's move on to the co-main event of the evening: Ben Rothwell against Alistair Overeem. And for pretty much every fight but the Lesnar win and the Mir win, Dave, Overeem not respecting his opponent, Overeem not putting his hands up, Overeem letting his opponent into range to punch him, and just kind of going out there lackadaisical. Yeah, landing, doing damage, throwing hard shots. Yeah, he's doing all that, Dave. But he's not. I mean, in this fight, definitely no killer instinct.
No.
Just let. I mean, I know it's a counter, but it was a counter that Rothwell could see coming. He comes over the top with that left, right into the side of the head. Falls down. Rothwell gets the victory, and had he not left himself so open, he might have got a win, because Rothwell after the fight said that he broke his arm blocking one of the kicks. So had he been able to actually follow up on some of those combinations, Dave, he could have easily won this fight. I mean, he should have won this fight. Add in, he broke the guy's arm. He really should have won this fight. Now he loses. He's, 2-4 in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken, after this fight?
Yeah.
And has looked like a huge bust. Not to mention the TRT suspension and all that jazz. His fight getting scrapped with Dos Santos. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC cut him. This was a horrible performance. I mean, it wasn't like, Rothwell did something spectacular. Or you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know. I don't know what to think about Alistair Overeem anymore.
The best tweet that I saw that night was, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the next Bellator heavyweight champion.
I saw that one too, and maybe, I think actually he probably signed with World Series of Fighting, but because Ray Sefo, kickboxing background. Anyways, yeah, just a horrible performance by Alistair Overeem. Give Ben Rothwell credit for hanging tough in there and being able to land a counter with a broken arm. I got to give him some credit. I mean, he landed the finishing blow, but this was a guy Overeem should have beat, and if he wants to stay in the UFC, I know he's done some training out there in Albuquerque with Jackson and Winklejohn, but he's got to change his lifestyle, not just his camp. I mean, things got to change for this guy if he wants to compete in the UFC. And I think before, because he fought in other organizations, while they were big, Dave, they weren't the UFC, and he was able to kind of get away with doing some of these shenanigans, maybe, for lack of a better term, half-assing training camps and whatnot, and he could go in there kind of lackadaisical, knowing that his opponent's not going to touch him. But you can't do that in the UFC. And if he wasn't sure of that, I think he found out Saturday night.
Yeah, pretty spot on, Jim. It goes back to it. You can be as great as you want to be outside of the UFC, but just because you're the Dream, Strike Force, Bama, and all these other organizations, just because you're their heavyweight champion, you got beat by a guy who looks like he delivers pizzas or, just doesn't care about fitness. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong, Ben Rothwell's got skills, but I mean, if you look, Overeem should, by looks, destroy that man. And, like you said it perfectly, Jim. His camp changed. That's all well and good, but his lifestyle hasn't changed at all.
Main event of the evening was at 185 pounds as Jacare Souza took on Gegard Mousasi for the second time. Unlike their first meeting, Dave, it did not end in the first round, and it did not end with a Gegard Mousasi knockout. Instead, this was a great performance by Jacare, not just controlling top game with takedowns, which he did and which we all thought he could do, but because, again, this is something that Jacare has that not too many people have, because of his great ground game and confidence that no one's going to try to take him down and wind up in his guard, he can kind of go in there with reckless abandon, really push the pace with the striking, and Gegard Mousasi, a guy who's very much a counter-puncher, likes to sit back and wait. I don't think he was, if you looked at tape of their first fight, definitely not expecting Jacare to come at him, and Jacare came at him full force, and this was one of the first times I can remember, Dave, Jacare really using his stand-up to set up the takedowns instead of really going in there and trying to take the other guy down, which he can usually do. but he made it a point to go in there, rush him, land big shots, then dump him on his butt, get the takedown. Very close to several submissions, but finally, when it was towards the end, Dave, I'm watching this fight here in the third round. I noticed Gegard kind of stood up, and there were a couple situations where Gegard left his neck open, and I was thinking, man, I wonder why Jacare is not trying for a guillotine. And this time, Jacare, maybe not recognize, he did recognize it, but I think maybe finally realized, maybe I should try a guillotine here. You know, he's left it open for me. Let me try it right here. Tries it, use those huge biceps of his to turn it over, get the guillotine, and gets the tap there in the third round. And, you know, if I can see that was a tactical error, you got to believe Jacare, you know, really recognized at that time, and it was like, man, he should try for a guillotine there. He's leaving his neck open. And that's a situation, I think, of Gegard just getting worn down and not realizing that he was in a bad spot. And lo and behold, he taps. And this was a dominant performance by Jacare. I don't know if a title shot is next for him, but I think he should get the winner of Vitor and Chris Weidman. I think that's what's next for him.
Yeah, the one takeaway I took from this fight is and you just said it, Jim, worn down. You know, Jacare had a very dominant performance, but at the end of the fight, it ended in the fourth. Is that correct? Right? I'm sorry.
4:30 in the third round. Very close to the fourth.
Yeah, close to the fourth. You know, at the end of the third round, Gegard Mousasi looked absolutely worn down. Gegard Mousasi is a top-level talent in the UFC's middleweight division, and there's not a lot of guys that can, you know, you've heard of deep waters. Where they were at was a completely different level. And that's something that's absolutely crazy. That Jacare is not a huge middleweight, and he is able to implement his game and just, for lack of a better term, break the will of Gegard Mousasi. He did not want to continue, and you know, you said that those were mistakes that he made, leaving his chin open. You know, when you're tired, you do crazy things, and I bet if that was the first round, you don't see stuff like that happen. But very impressive performance for Jacare. I think if he wants to win the belt, I think he's hoping for Vitor to knock out Weidman, because I still think Weidman would be a favorite against Jacare.
All right, before we get on to UFC Fight Night 51 this coming weekend, let's first talk about Bellator. They have Bellator 124 coming up, and it will be right here in my neck of the woods in Plymouth, Michigan. I think, believe it or not, it actually takes surface streets to get there. So it's not that far from my house, and looking forward to it. The big main event of Bellator 124 is the light heavyweight title fight between Joey Beltran and Emmanuel Newton. We will also see Liam McGarry against Kelly Undenson for the Summer Series light heavyweight tournament as well. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, Jason Fisher will be fighting on the undercard, one of Darren Cruikshank's top training partners and coaches there at Michigan Top Team over in Dearborn, Michigan. He will be fighting on the undercard against a longtime MMA veteran Tony Hervey. We also have a friend of the show, Shamir Garcia, who's been on the show, a guy I went to high school with. He will be making his Bellator debut on the undercard as well, and he's now 6-0 in his MMA career. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's the first time since the first time they've really come to Southeast Michigan. They've come to Windsor a couple times across the border. They've been up at Mount Pleasant, which, if anyone knows Michigan, Mount Pleasant's nowhere near the Metro Detroit area. It's where Central Michigan University is. And I'm happy, Dave, that Bellator's somewhere real close to home, and I think in a great venue, Compuware Arena. It's a nice venue. It's where the minor league hockey team plays, so you got a decent amount of seating capacity there, and I think you got the potential to get more fans with it being here than say up in Mount Pleasant or Soaring Eagle. And I don't know how it's going to translate to ratings or whatever, but I think it should be a fun night of fights. The only thing you can really question is putting Joey Beltran up against Emmanuel Newton.
Yeah, this is a fight that you said that this is near Central Michigan University?
No, it's not. The last couple times, the two times they came to actually Michigan before were there. This is like right near my neck of the woods here at Metro Detroit.
Uh, and I think it's going to be a hard sell in the local area there because of what you said about the fights about Joey Beltran and Emmanuel Newton. I just don't think that's going to bring in a bunch of people. I don't even think neither one of those guys are from the area, right?
No, I mean there's a pretty good stock of Michigan talent fighting on the undercard that I think will help boost sales. And like I said, if you're looking to see major MMA, it's been a long time since we've had a promotion come to Metro Detroit. I mean, if you want to look at not counting, like I said, Mount Pleasant's nowhere near Metro Detroit. It's been since UFC 123. You know what I mean? Since a major MMA promotion has come to Metro Detroit. So I think if you're into MMA, this is a big deal regardless of who's fighting. And I think this will be a gauge as to whether or not Bellator will come back to Southeast Michigan.
Yeah, I hope it does well. I like when they go to areas that the UFC is going to neglect. But this is a card where there's nothing that really jumps out at you. LC Davis is on this card. Ryan Couture is on this card. They're both fighting guys I've never heard of. And there's very little build-up for the tournament final with McGarry and Undenson because it happened this summer. And how many people watched it? They didn't even promote it that much. So, of course we're crapping on the card, which means it'll probably knock it out of the park. But, hey, it's free, and I'm going to watch it. So...
I wish, like you said, the LC Davis. I think that if you listen to the interview with Jason, he was trying to get his fight on the main card. And to be honest, I think Jason's fight against Tony Hervey should be there instead of the LC Davis fight.
Yeah, I would agree.
Not you throw in the fact that Tony Hervey's a veteran of the sport. Let's not forget, Tony Hervey fought Takanori Gomi in 2009 to a 5-round decision. He didn't win, but that's awfully impressive. So Hervey's a name some real hardcore MMA fans will know, and Fisher's fought in Bellator before, and he's been on several main cards before. So it's not like something new for Jason Fisher, and you're building up the fact he's basically fighting in his hometown. I think technically Vonia the next town over, but I mean basically his hometown. So I think that would have been a really nice fight. The crowd would have got into it, main card broadcast and all that. I think that would have been really a nice fight to see, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going with some friends. This will be the first time, Dave, believe it or not, I'm going to a major MMA event as a non-media member. All the other Bellator fights and XFC fights and Strikeforce, WEC, UFC, I've always been media. You got to kind of be reserved. You can't get too up or down on any of the fights, But this time I can kind of let everything loose a little bit, So I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully some of my friends who actually haven't been to a live fight before, they enjoy it too. So, I'm looking forward to it. Even if it's a bummer, it's still fun because, like I said, it's been a while since a major promotion has come here in Southeast Michigan.
Yeah, you should bring your phone or your if you can get a camera in there, take some videos at the beginning and as the guys are walking out, get some crowd reaction videos and. Just so we can kind of see from your point of view, how the crowd reacts. If it's as big a deal as we think it is, might be kind of cool for the fans to see.
I'll see what I can do.
Cool.
Well, let's get to our last segment here on the show. UFC Fight Night 51, Bigfoot Silva against Andre Arlovski down in Brazil this Saturday. Fox Sports 1. 6 fights will be shown on the main card, and the first fight of the evening will be in the women's bantamweight division as Jessica Andrade will take on Larissa Pacheco. Looking at Andrade, 2-1 in the UFC, overall riding a 2-fight winning streak. Her last fight was a win over Raquel Pennington at UFC 171, and 5 of her 11 career victories are by submission. Looking at her opponent Pacheco, UFC debut, 10-0 in her career, undefeated, and 6 of her 10 fights are won by submission. Has mainly fought down for the Jungle Fights organization down in Brazil, which I hate to go on record, but I guess as far as I could tell, Dave, probably the largest organization down in Brazil, Jungle. It seems like a lot of the Brazilian fighters one time or another has fought for Jungle Fight. So that's somewhat decent competition and promotion. But I think Jessica Andrade is one of the up-and-coming talents here in this bantamweight division. I think she's very big for the weight class, I think, in my opinion. And I think for Pacheco, she's going to have her work cut out for her, taking against Jessica Andrade.
I would agree. I think Jessica Andrade is a very good talent, young up-and-coming talent. And it came up in conversation. I wouldn't be half upset after what I think will be, a fairly easy victory. This might be one of the girls I would like to see fight Bethe Correia, Jessica Andrade. So,
absolutely. Couldn't agree more, Dave.
Yeah, I think that, this is a fight where I think this is definitely Jessica's fight to lose. Coming into Brazil, this girl, her opponent, new to the division, new to the bright lights and the main card, she's kicking it all off. I think that the deck is pretty much stacked against this girl, but definitely worth tuning in to see this kick off because Jessica Andrade, is she going to beat Ronda Rousey in the next year? Probably not, but she's somebody who write down and remember Jessica Andrade's name.
Real quick, interesting fight to kick off the card, but a fight, it didn't have to be the kickoff card. I think I would have liked to seen that Johnny Bedford-Hani Yahya fight on the main card, to be quite honest with you, instead of the very first night of the evening.
Yeah.
I don't know if... Johnny Bedford is a pretty exciting guy, and he had Hani Yahya's submission skills. I don't know.
No.
I feel like those two notable guys. And I think looking at the other names that did make this main card, those are more notable guys than some of the guys we're going to see here on the main portion.
Yeah, and that I will give you as we move up the card. There's probably a couple people who don't need to be there.
Next fight of the evening, 135 pounds, bantamweight division. Iuri Alcantara takes on Russell Doane. Alcantara is 5-2 with a no contest in the UFC, currently riding a 2-fight winning streak. His last fight was a victory over Vaughn Lee at Fight Night Berlin. And of his 30 career victories, 25 finishes, 13 knockouts, and 12 submissions. Looking at Doane, 2-0 in the UFC, overall riding a 3-fight winning streak. His last fight was a victory over Marcus Brimage at UFC 175, and 6 of his 14 career victories are by knockout. Now, Russell Doane, yeah, he beat Marcus Brimage, but I think Brimage won that fight. I didn't think that was an overly great performance by Doane. And Alcantara, this guy is pretty legit. Even though he lost to Uriah Faber, I don't think Uriah Faber steamrolled him by any means. I think Faber beat him and definitely deserved the victory. But, this is a guy 30, I think, in 5 overall in his career. Like I mentioned, 25 career finish victories. So it's not just like he's a black belt. He's got some power, too. He's really good on the ground. His stand-up's been evolving. This is a very dangerous guy, and this is a guy that's kind of been waiting to break out for a couple of years now in the UFC. And I wouldn't say Russell Doane's being fed to the wolves, but we're going to find out whether Russell Doane's legit very quickly against Alcantara.
Yeah, Alcantara is definitely a lot further along in his career. Uriah Faber gave that man a lot of respect. Said that this isn't an easy fight. Just because you don't know Alcantara doesn't mean that it's going to be an easy fight for somebody like Uriah Faber. But he's been around the UFC, and he's got 2 losses and a no contest. And if I remember the no contest, it was kind of a shady no contest. But either way, like you said, I think Russell Doane, you want to make a name for yourself, this is the perfect guy to fight in Alcantara. This is the perfect guy to beat and make a statement that, hey, I belong in the bantamweight division.
And for Alcantara, I think you can pretty much go anywhere, and I think you can have success. But if you're Doane, you got to keep your conditioning up, because I think he kind of faded in that Brimage fight as it went on. And I think his conditioning has to be on point to try to beat a guy like Alcantara, because this is not. If Uriah Faber couldn't finish him, I'm not saying he can't, but he's a tough guy to finish. I'll put it that way. So
Hey Jim,
I expect this one to go 15.
You ever watch the show Miami Ink back in the day?
No, but I've heard of it.
So the guy that does the tattoos, he had like this apprentice, and I forgot what the guy's name was. He looks exactly like Russell Doan. Just saying.
Oh, maybe it was.
Yeah, could have been.
I don't know. All right, let's get to the next fight of the evening, which will be in the welterweight division as Santiago Ponzinibbio, how do you like that name, will take on UFC newcomer Wendell Oliveira. Looking at Ponzinibbio, 0-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Ryan LaFlare in his debut at Fight Night 32. 10 of his 18 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Oliveira, as I said, UFC debut, 7-fight winning streak for him, 24 victories in his career, 11 of them are by knockout. And also, interesting, a guy, majority of his wins are by knockout, but also he has 10 decision victories of those 24. So it's either he knocks you out or it goes to decision, it looks like, for Mr. Oliveira. And again, we talked about interesting choices to the main card. This is probably the one that scratches my head the most because Ponzinibbio, if any of you did see his fight against Ryan LaFlare, did not look good against Ryan LaFlare. Ryan LaFlare dominated him for that fight. And you bring in a guy nobody's ever heard of who I think he's 24-7 or 24-8 officially, Oliveira. So not horrible, but not a huge prospect, a guy that's definitely been around for a while. And I guess you're hoping maybe with some of the knockout power of Ponzinibbio and Oliveira we get an exciting fight. That's what it looks to be. It looks to be like this one's going to play out on the feet. I don't know enough about Oliveira to say, oh, he should go into the ground game, which is what he should do. I mean, if you follow Ryan LaFleur's game plan, you can see that Ponzinibbio doesn't really offer much off his back. So if you're Oliveira, you should go that route because, for brief instances, Ponzinibbio showed that he had some solid stand-up in the LaFleur fight, but showed that he definitely does not have a very advanced grappling game.
Yeah, I don't even know how to break it down because, like you said, I really don't know enough about Wendell Oliveira. But let me throw this at you, Jim. We always make fun of Bellator.com for being awful. The UFC's got to have people, right, that just run the website. If you click on Wendell's page, it shows his record and no other information. No biography, no nothing. So, I mean, we can't get somebody on that. I mean,
you think that'd be updated the week before the fight?
Yeah, not 3 days. Anyway.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, let's move on to the next one because, like I said, there's not a lot of information. I gave it my best shot there on that. And let's get to the next fight. 155 pounds, Leonardo Santos against former Ultimate Fighter winner Efren Escudero, now making his third stint in the UFC. That's right, third stint in the UFC. And looking at Escudero, he is overall 3-4 in the UFC. He has not fought for the organization since 2010. And since he left the promotion, Dave, this makes it interesting why he's making his third stint. He went 4-3.
Wow.
And 12 of his 22 career victories are by submission. Leonardo Santos 1-0-1 in the UFC. His last fight was that draw. That was against Norman Park back at Fight Night 39. And 8 of his 12 career victories are by submission. Now, in the Park fight, that was mainly a draw because Park got that point taken away for grabbing the shorts. Otherwise, Park probably would have won that fight. But what we saw in that fight was it wasn't an overly exciting fight by any stretch of the imagination. Santos looked like he would have had solid stand-up, but Park definitely was able to push and control this fight up against the cage and use his grappling. That's why I think Park would have won that fight had the point not been taken away. And Escudero is very much a wrestler, comes from that wrestling background. And I got to believe Escudero watched tape of that fight, and I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to go right in there and try to get up close, get this thing in the clinch, and get this thing to the ground. Now, I don't know how much Santos has worked on that type of his game since the Norman Park victory. If he was smart, that's what he would hopefully do a lot of focus on, especially once he learned Escudero would be his opponent for the next fight. But if he can keep the distance, keep it standing, I see no reason why he can't beat Efren Escudero, who, again, I'm not sure why he's making his third stint in the UFC. And with that being said, Dave, why he's now getting a main card slot. Talk about a curious booking.
Yeah. Curious booking for sure. For Santos, you by all accounts, you lost your fight to Norman Park. Let's just scratch that one. You won your debut. You won the Ultimate Fighter. You come into this one, you beat Efren Escudero. It should do great things for your standing within the UFC. Beating, you can say what you want about him, third stint, fourth stint, fifth stint. He's still a veteran of the sport. He's still a very talented fighter. And, should he be in the UFC? Probably not. But he can do wonders for Santos if he's able to beat him, because putting that name on your resume is that's a big thing, Jim.
Absolutely. Let's stick with the lightweights here as the co-main event of the evening pits a longtime UFC veteran Gleison Tibau against Peter Hallman. Looking at Hallman, 2-1 in the UFC. His last fight, huge victory, probably the biggest in his career, as he defeated Yves Edwards at Fight Night Albuquerque. And of his 15 career victories, he has 14 finishes, 7 knockouts, 7 submissions. Looking at Tibau, 14-8 in the UFC. Longtime veteran. Last fight, he defeated Pat Healy at Fight Night 47. And of his 29 career victories, 14 are by decision. Now, Peter Hallman got a huge step in competition when he took on Yves Edwards in his last fight. He was able to pass that test with flying covers. Now, against Gleison Tibau, you're versing a guy who's very tough to finish, a guy who's very big, very strong, and very physical for this weight class. And the key with Tibau is trying to get this thing into the third round, where he always seems to fade. If you look at just about all his fights, because almost all of them go into the third round, win or lose, Dave, always seems to fade in that third round. If Hallman can last into the third round, I think he can win. He has solid stand-up, and his grappling is pretty solid. But early on, I think he's going to have trouble taking down Tibau because of the size. And standing up, in those early rounds will probably be fairly even. Obviously, Tibau should have the more power of the two, but it's whether or not Hallman can kind of last. Because I think if he can last, he can get the victory. But I think if the physicality is so tough for him and hard to handle from the top, this is stretch, Dave. Tibau could, believe it or not, get a finish in this fight. He could actually do it. I'm betting that he won't, but he could. This has the makings of Gleison Tibau maybe actually getting a finish for once in a while.
Yeah, Gleison Tibau can't seem to get over that hump. If you look back through his career, you said he was 29-10, but if you go back through his career, the most wins he can put together is 4. 4 wins, 2 losses. 2 wins, 1 loss. 2 wins, 1 loss. 3 wins, a loss. A win, a loss, 2 wins, a loss, and a win. I mean, he can't seem... When you get 3, 4 fights in a row, you're getting ready to go to that next level, and for some reason, something always happens that he just can't get to that next level. Now, granted, he beat Kurt Pellegrino, Rafael Oliveira, and Rafael Dos Anjos. He won 3 fights in a row, and then he ran into Nurmagomedov, who at the time was pretty much an unknown that nobody knew about. Now it doesn't look so bad, but it just seems like he can't keep it rolling. I don't know if that's, hey, I just beat Pat Healy via decision, in July. Now I'm just going to coast into this fight against Hallman. Is it a mental thing? Is it a, I don't know what it is, but it should tell you something. Yeah, he's got a bunch of fights, but, does he look at a fight, maybe he looks at it like a baseball player. It's not a contract year. I don't need to perform. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be an excuse. I don't know what it would be, but like you said about Peter Hallman, he took the step up, fought Eve Edwards, passed that test, and he's got another tough test in Gleason Tebow. So yeah, big test. Hope he studied hard, and we'll see what grade he gets come Saturday.
Main event of the evening, Antonio Bigfoot Silva against former UFC heavyweight champion Andrei Arlovski. Looking at Bigfoot Silva, 2-2-1 in the UFC. His last fight was that draw against Mark Hunt back at Fight Night 33, and 13 of his 18 career victories are by knockout. Looking at the former champion Arlovski, 11-4 in the UFC. He made his return to the organization at UFC 174, where he defeated Brendan Schaub, and 15 of his 22 career victories are by knockout. If the Andrei Arlovski that fought Brendan Schaub shows up in this fight, I don't think he wins. Plain and simple. We need to see Andrei Arlovski, regardless of output, because obviously that does need to increase, but he has to be sticking and moving around and using his speed and peppering Bigfoot Silva and try to get him that way. Because if he goes in there flat-footed, not moving around, not throwing a lot of punches, even though Bigfoot Silva's obviously he's called Bigfoot for a reason, a little slower. We always talk about him not getting off to fast starts, but he has power, and a guy that has a solid stand-up game, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's a guy that can last. He's a hard guy to finish, and a guy that can eventually get a finish. Obviously, majority of the way is knockout, but he also can submit you as well. And for Arlovski, like you said, you got to be moving around and trying to outspeed him, because if you can't do that, he's going to hit Arlovski with a bomb, and he's going to knock him out. It's plain and simple that. Regardless of the layoff for Bigfoot Silva, Bigfoot Silva, I think, should be favored, and I would think he would win this fight. But again, Andrei Arlovski's definitely got to step up his game. And I think if he loses, if we see another performance like we did against Brendan Schaub, I think it's time for him to retire. Yeah,
Arlovski that fought Schaub can definitely not show up. That's not going to get the job done. Is it ridiculous to think that with a victory that Bigfoot Silva could get a title shot again? Like, there's nobody left. He's currently ranked 4. And he realistically could get the next title shot.
Well, I think win or lose, I would love to see another fight with Hunt, just because that was a draw. I think that's out there. And obviously, I know Roy Nelson's about to take on Mark Hunt, but I'd love to see Roy Nelson, Bigfoot Silva.
Yeah, the fight I really want to see. Well, first of all, I think that if we don't see a different Arlovski, I think this is Bigfoot all the way. He just has a better skill set, I think, and it's been a while since Arlovski's been in there, and the competition that he's faced in other organizations, wasn't the highest level, and Bigfoot is definitely no slouch. But one fight I would like to see, Jim, considering Bigfoot is ranked number 4 in the division, I would love to see him fight a guy that can't seem to get a fight in the heavyweight division, and that's Stipe.
Absolutely. Well, let's get to picks here, Dave. First fight of the evening, women's bantamweight division, Jessica Andrade against Larissa Pacheco. I don't know a lot about Pacheco, newcomer. I'm definitely going with Jessica Andrade.
I am going to go with Jessica Andrade.
Russell Doan against Ori Alcantara at bantamweight. I think Doan definitely has some potential. Definitely one of the younger guys in the division. I think does have some talent, but Alcantara is I think waiting to break out and could be the next big threat at 135. So give me Alcantara.
As well as myself, I will take Alcantara.
Santiago Ponzinibbio against Wendell Oliveira. I think this one's a pick-em fight. Even though Oliveira is a newcomer, I really think you can't go wrong with either guy. But just because he has fought in the UFC once already, Dave, I will take the Argentine Ponzinibbio.
I saw Ponzinibbio's name on the UFC champions checklist so I'm going to go with him. That's awful.
At 155 pounds, Leonardo Santos against Efrain Escudero. I think because of Escudero's wrestling background and the way Santos was kind of neutralized by Park's, wrestling attempts, I think that plays into the hands of Escudero. So I'm going to go with Escudero to win in his third return to the UFC.
I'm going to take Santos. Just feeling it.
Co-main event of the evening, also at 155 pounds, Gleison Tibau against Peter Hallman. I think Hallman has a chance, but I like Tibau, home country, and believe it or not, Tibau doesn't fight on that many main cards. This is the first time in quite a while I can remember Tibau fighting on a main card, and it's down in Brazil. I think he's going to be jacked for this one, so I'm going to go with Gleison Tibau.
I'm going to see the back and forth slide continue, so I'm going to go with Hallman for the victory.
Main event of the evening, Bigfoot Silva against Andrei Arlovski, the former UFC champ. I think Arlovski's definitely getting at the end of his career here, and despite the layoff for Bigfoot Silva, I like him to win this one.
Yeah, I'm going to take Bigfoot as well.
All right, we definitely got to give a shout-out to our friends. I already gave one to Vigilante, so we got to give one to MMAinsider.net. Follow them on Twitter at MMAinsiderNet. Our friends at MMAforlife.ca, on Twitter at _MMA4Life. Of course, our great friends doing all the regional coverage here in Bluegrass MMA. Follow them on Twitter at Bluegrass MMA, bluegrassmma.com. Of course, our friends at MMASignaturesUSA.com. Getting the best gear out there. They're doing a lot of great stuff. Going to be officially certifying all your official signed items as well. Got our friends at TopRatedMMA.com. Buy their gear, TopRatedMMA.com. And before we end, I want to give a quick shout out to LegendsOfMMA.com. Over this past week, I was actually contacted by them. They are, as far as I know, running the only MMA Hall of Fame. It started last year. They've inducted their first class of Hall of Famers. They're going to get ready in November in Reno to induct their second class. And they actually contacted me as one of their 30 people media panel to vote on the next class for their MMA Hall of Fame. And while not a lot of people know about it, and I'm hoping to spread the word here, legendsofmma.com, you can also get them on Facebook, Legends of MMA Hall of Fame. They wanted me to vote. Out of their 20 people were selected, nominated, and I got to choose 5. I'm not going to tell you which 5 yet until the voting comes out, but if you want to see the complete list and see who I had to choose from or anything, I got to do that this past week, and I think that's November. It's either the 5th or the 12th. I'll have to get more information as it gets closer, but very honored to do that. I thought that was really cool. It just kind of came out of the blue, so it was really cool to do that, and wanted to mention that before we left out the broadcast. And, of course, Fight Chicks, right? Fight Chicks. They're in Invicta, crushed it there, and definitely glad to be presented by Fight Chicks. All right, he's the Juice, Dave Sadler. Follow him on Twitter at Vigilante MMA. Any final words there, Juice?
No, I'll be at HFC in Valparaiso, Indiana. I'll probably do a report and throw it up on Vigilante and MMAinsider.net. But definitely, if you're interested in keeping up with the night's coverage, follow those guys at Bluegrass MMA. They'll be there for sure, and they're very good at doing the play-by-play as it goes down. So definitely check them out.
Once again, I will be at Bellator 124 over here in Plymouth, Michigan. So if you're in town for the event, hit me up. I'm definitely going to be there at the fights, and looking forward to them on Friday. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. So thanks for listening to this week's live show. Once again, for those of you either watching live or you listen to audio version, we have interviews coming up with UFC newcomer Johnny Case and also Nick from A&N Sports. But thanks for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks.